And one of the things that this gave me the opportunity for was to go and study more about Tu B'Shvat, because Tu B'Shvat is not a very well-known holiday and there's not a lot written about it. So you did me a favor because it really got me to go and do some research, and it certainly fitted into the kind of things that we talk about, and what you're involved in here is growth. Very much a focus of Torah is growth. Judaism is not a static religion. It's not a religion where you do certain things by rote. You continue to grow, and it's infinite. There's no end to growth. But the thing is that there's so much to do that Hashem in His kindness gives us different chagim, and each one we can focus on a different part. We couldn't do it all together, so we're going to look at today some of the things that we can learn about growth from Tu B'Shvat. I wanted to just talk about a few other things first. I wanted to talk about time. And time, from a Jewish point of view, is actually linked to creation. Our calendar starts at Bereshit. That's where we count from. And it's always linked to creation. The other two calendars, the Gregorian and the Islamic calendar, the Islamic one is linked to the moon, and the Gregorian one is linked to the sun. They tie to other things. Ours is actually linked to creation. And that is why people seem to understand and realize that at yacht site, people generally do it on the day that the person died, the Hebrew day, because there's an understanding that Neshama returns on that day. But actually our real birthday is on our Hebrew birthday, because that's when our Neshama comes down, and that's where our mazel is connected. And mazel is also, I'm going to talk a little bit about horoscopes to that tonight. Our mazel is, our luck comes down with that, you like, but actually there are emanations from heaven in every time zone. So you cannot keep Shabbos on a Monday, because that's the day that suits you. There are no emanations of holiness on a Monday. But if you keep it on Shabbos and you can tap into it, there's this like spiritual boost, because it comes down and you can be part of it. So every single Yontif has a spiritual boost. So like when we're going to do Pesach, there is a spiritual boost of freedom. Anything you want to be free of, you have this extra boost. Now the same thing with Tu B'Shvat. There are boosts that are going to be happening tomorrow night and Thursday, but we're starting early, which is good. To actually understand that we need to tap into these potentials, because time is actually holy. Time from a Jewish point of view, just like space occupies space, time occupies, is a concept that we can work with, and we need to tap into it. It's not just another day. Every single day has enormous potential. So when we have a birthday and we celebrate it, we are tapping into much more. As you were saying, you tap in, you're getting a boost of energy, but you're also tapping into the day your soul came down. You're tapping into your soul's journey. It's meant to be a time, which I'm sure you're doing, where you think about what the last year was like and where you're going. Big part of Torah, which we're going to be talking about with the New Year of the Trees as well, is what happened in the previous year. We do this on Rosh Hashanah, and what are we going to work towards? It's never stagnant. We're never happy with who we are. We're not miserable, but we also go, there's always more that we can do. So what is Tu B'Shvat? What's interesting, it's scarcely even a holiday. It's not like Purim, which everybody knows about. And it says in the Magen Avraham, it's the only source that apparently mentions Tu B'Shvat, that it's the custom to eat many types of fruit on Tu B'Shvat. That's where the only place that it said that we should have this custom. And we know that it's the Rosh Hashanah of the trees. But nothing else is actually written about it, not any other customs, but there's a lot of Kabbalah written about it. So what are we looking for when we look at Tu B'Shvat? So one of the things, my first point, is Tu B'Shvat is a time of optimism. And I thought, given what we're going through, and I suppose as Jews often we're going through difficult things, and in our personal lives, but given what is going on in the world for Jews right now, we need to take optimism. So you said it beautifully. This is the time of the year where whatever darkness we've been going through, the very potential for rebirth and regrowth and freshness and beauty is in this Chag. The source that I said something just slightly different, that this is the midpoint. So the darkest point of winter is actually around Hanukkah. I think it's called solstice. Is that what it's called? It's got a name. The darkest point.
Winter solstice?
Yeah. And then this is the midpoint Tu B'Shvat between spring and that darkest point. So it's a cause for optimism to know that no matter how dark things are, and you can't see anything, it's dark, the trees don't have leaves, as you say, everything's going on under the soil. But from Hashem's point of view, there's always reconstruction. There's always potential for bracha. And that's why we can always be optimistic and tap in to the optimism that after winter comes spring. And that's what we on the cusp of. After the winter we've gone through, I'm looking forward to see what spring Hashem is going to bring us. Tu B'Shvat is also an opportunity for faith, and I thought this was really fascinating. There's a story in the Midrash of an old guy planting a fig tree. And when he was asked if he really expected the tree for him to be able to consume the fruits, he said, I was born into a world flourishing with ready pleasures. My ancestors planted for me, and now I plant for my children. So planting is an act of faith. To bury a fertile seed and then walk away with no way of tracking progress for months or years to come demands a calmness of spirit and deep-rooted trust in God. So many variables can influence the eventual outcome, and we have so few means of control that any future yield is miraculous. And I once had a friend in South Africa, he was actually a farmer, and he said farmers have the ultimate of faith. He said you plant the seed and you have no idea if you're going to have a harvest. You're very in touch with, you put in the seed, you can plant the soil, you can put in a bit of fertilizer, whatever they do, but whether or not it's successful depends on so many things. It's an act of faith. And the same thing, I was thinking about, they were talking about planting trees. They actually were doing in Israel, JNF, and there was a whole tree planting thing this week. We Jews in Israel are very much about planting trees, and we're planting for future generations. It's an act of faith that there will be a tomorrow, and there will be future generations. We don't go, well, I can't benefit, so I'm not going to do it. It's an act of faith. And I thought that's a beautiful thing. We plant things, and these are literal things, and we will talk about less literal things in a minute, but when we plant things, we have an act of faith that there is going to be a future. There are going to be future Jews. There is a world that is going to continue and be blessed. Now, even though the custom is to eat many different fruits, Tu B'Shvat is actually called the New Year of Trees. And only 500 years ago, the Gemara spoke about the deeper meaning of what this is all about. It says actually, the real words is, it's the New Year of the tree. It doesn't say of trees. And so what Kabbalists say is it's referring to the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. So what happened was Adam and Chava were told, you've got a beautiful world, you can have everything you want except that one tree. And so what did they do? Right, what do we all do? They went ahead and they thought they were cleverer than God, or they tried to seek spirituality in a different way. They're all different types of interpretations. But what they did was they didn't follow Hashem's will. They decided to have the fruit that they were told not to have. And so when we have these fruits, as Hashem has told us, and when we make a bracha on the fruit, because that is Hashem's will, and Hashem has instructed us to make brachas when we eat fruit, we are actually rectifying the sin because we're doing it Hashem's way. So it's not only eating the fruits, but it's actually making the bracha. That's a big part of eating the fruits, because when you make the bracha, you understand that the way to live in this world is to follow Hashem's directives. That's the recipe for success. And so when we eat the fruit with a bracha and we connect to Hashem in that way, we actually are rectifying the sin of the Garden of Eden. Now, why the variety of fruits? So one of the simple explanations is that we see Hashem's infinite multiplicity, that Hashem takes so many different forms. I must say, when I moved here to Australia and I went first to the markets, I could not believe some of the fruit. I'd never seen them. For a lot of Asian fruit, right? They're very different to what we're used to. Fascinating. Some of them looked a bit creepy, I have to say. They didn't look so easy to eat. But there's so many varieties, and we're meant to enjoy variety. We're not meant to be bored or just have one thing. Hashem says, look, Now you're talking about time and birthdays. This week is actually a very special year for Chabad, week for Chabad, because on Shabbos was the 10th of Shvat. And the 10th of Shvat was the day that the current Rebbe came into being the Rebbe. It's also the Yotzat of the previous Rebbe. And when this Rebbe ascended to his leadership, he did a famous ma'amah called Basar Lagani. And basically, in short, and I'm really not doing it justice, it's all about the world is a garden. Come into my garden. Come and see how beautiful the world is. Now that's a very, very hard concept, especially when you're going through hard times. But the truth is, the Hasidic masters teach us, if we just know how to look, this world is a garden. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's actually an exercise to notice that we're in a garden and to appreciate it even when there are troubles. So when we walk into a beautiful fruit shop or we sit down and we eat, to actually realize all the beautiful things in the world. Don't let the darkness or the difficult things cloud over that we actually are in a beautiful garden. It's a very difficult ma'am. I'm certainly not an expert in it. But this idea that actually we are in a garden, we want to go back to the Garden of Eden where it was before the sin, where it was much more idyllic, but at the end of the day, Tu B'Shvat is an opportunity to realize that this world is a garden. Now, one of the things that I often talk about is, and I would have spoken about it on Purim, is this world has a mask. Nature is a mask. And part of our job as Jews is to see beyond the mask. It's very easy to just see things on face value. So if you look at statistics or you listen to the news or you see certain things, you think that's reality. But we have a godly soul and we can tap into what's above reality. By tapping into Hashem, we tap into what's above reality. So when we have the fruit, which is physical, we have a moment to actually go beyond. What does this mean? It means that fruit is being produced. It means that all these years Hashem has taken care of us. It means that this is a garden. And if we don't see it in a moment, it's because we have got to develop ourselves more. It is there, but we need to work on seeing beyond nature. I have to add one of the things that I read, that Tu B'Shvat is also a reminder to look after the environment, to appreciate all the beauty. The Torah way is not to desecrate the world or to remove it of all its natural things. It's very much about looking after the garden and appreciating all the things we have and to not destroy trees and fruit and so on, bal takshit, unnecessarily. So those are just some of the thoughts. Oh, one more, actually, as well, and I said to you about astrology, that actually the mazel, now a lot of people don't know that the star signs are actually all come from the Torah. And the mazel that Tu B'Shvat is in Aquarius. And if you know what the Aquarius picture looks like, it's actually a bucket. Someone is pouring water. In Hebrew, the mazel is called deli, which means bucket. So the whole idea about that is all the star signs, by the way, reflect the Hebrew months. And there are many different ideas that I read about, but one of them is the same thing with the bucket. You can eat a fruit and just gobble it down like an animal without a bracha. It's what you do with it that makes you holy. Similarly, if you're given a bucket, what do you fill it with? If you fill it with water that is going to nourish the garden, then you're using it for a holy purpose. And also water is an analogy with Torah. So even this mazel is about, which we're going to talk about in a minute, about pouring water, pouring Torah into the world to enrich and enliven the world. So even the astrology sign is linked, it is linked to the mazel, which is about pouring water. So,
but the star sign has nothing to do with water, it's actually air. And it's the star sign that produces most genius in the world.
wow. So let's talk a little bit about, we are going to do a little bit of workshopping. Sarah Tova asked for some workshop, but I did want to just give some optimistic messages, and I want to talk now about the growth part that I know Sarah Tova wanted to talk about, but it is important to think about how each Chag gives us an opportunity to grow and what we should think about. So this I've got from Rabbi Ginsburg, and he writes the most beautiful Kabbalistic. He says, the Torah says that man is a tree of the field. we're also nurtured by deep roots. Our roots come back from Abraham and Sarah and the people that came before us. But we also have different parts of the tree, and he actually says that we are more like plants in certain ways than like animals. How? Animals are horizontal. Human beings and plants stand upright. And human beings, like plants, are always striving upwards. So in that way, we are like a tree of the field. He says, listen to the language that we use. We live by ladders of success, scales of growth, hierarchies of competence. We aspire to rising up in status, reaching heights, elevating our perspective, or climbing to the top. These are all expressions where it's all about rising up. Like trees, we're always growing, we're always going up. But what he says is there's a difference. We need to see ourselves as an inverted tree, because we're not trees, we're human beings. And what does that mean? So he talks about there are 4 parts of a tree. There are roots, trunks, branches, and fruit. With a tree, the roots are in the ground. In the inverted tree, that's the human being, our roots are in the heaven. This root, our root, is connected to Hashem. Our soul root is connected to Hashem. The trunk is the main body of the tree. It supports its upward growth. The branches spread out to the sides. They produce leaves, but they also photosynthesize. And then we have edible fruits. Those are the 4 parts. So the roots are the least glamorous of a tree. They're hidden underground, but they've got to be strong to hold up a tree, and they've got to keep pace with the body. If a tree grows too quickly and the roots are not strong enough, they will not hold up the body. Now similarly, if our faith does not grow, if we stay stuck, but we just grow in some way, we will not be supported. We will not be able to support ourselves. So often what happens is that people just develop without having a basis, and they lose sight of who they are. They lose sight of their goals. The trunk represents your developed personality. It does develop it gets food from the source, but it expands every year in a widening circle. And I thought this was the most magnificent image. A tree trunk gets a new ring every year. It starts off very thin and it gets a new ring every year. And that's the goal of our growth. After we're saplings, no one can always see our growth. But we need to grow like a tree, that we are expanding, that every year there is a new ring. And that's what I was saying earlier about every Chag or every Rosh Hashanah. We need to add on to our growth. Other people can't always see it, just like you can't see the roots. But we need to make sure that we're growing, that we don't stay static. A tree doesn't stay static. As I say, even at small amounts, you can see the age of a tree if you cut it through. We need to continue growing. So the roots and the trunk represent the inner maturation of the person, your private world. But then your branches, when you are connecting to the outside world. So that's relationships, travel, new experiences, all the things that you're involved in. However, what photosynthesis represents is you need to take the world that you're part of and transform it in some way for the good of the world. It's not enough just to go traveling. It's wonderful to travel. But what are you doing with it to make the world better? And I thought this is such a deep idea, that a tree's leaves, the leaves benefit the world. They're not just spreading out, and they're also giving shelter. But through photosynthesis, they're taking in the carbon dioxide and they're bringing out oxygen. And this is a magnificent metaphor, that we are given this beautiful world, but are we, so to speak, photosynthesizing? Are we taking it in, transforming it, and giving something back to the world that is healthy and good and helpful? So that is the analogy of the leaves. And then the fruit, the final stages, that is mitzvahs and good deeds. They nourish the soul and society. It's the loftiest level of the soul. So the fruits represent the mitzvahs that we do. It represents what we do for others. It represents our capacity to take our growth and to spread it. The highest level of a tree is to be able to produce fruit so that those fruits can then grow another tree. And that is our aim. It's beautiful to be connected to our soul. It's beautiful to grow on an individual level. It's beautiful to transform the world in many ways. But are we producing fruits? So whether it's through having shiurim and sharing concepts, whether it's through literally having children, whether it's through teaching other things, whether it's through helping people, Tu B'Shvat reminds us of a very, very basic Jewish concept. We are in this world to produce fruit. We are in this world to make a difference. We are in this world to spread Torah and mitzvahs. We are not in this world just for our own personal growth. And this is a big problem in some of the philosophies that are out there. People believe that growth is, sitting on a mountain and meditating. That's beautiful, and you feel good. But from a Jewish point of view, that's just stuck at the trunk. What are you then doing with your growth? What are you doing to rectify the sin of the Garden of Eden? What are you doing to produce fruit for the next generation? And this ties into our mission in the world. We are like trees of the field, and we have a personal mission. So as you can see, there are many, many symbols of what the tree is. And what he actually says is we need to merit. I thought this was quite cute. We need to merit to be called a tree of the field. Because a tree of the field brings such benefit to the world that are we actually living up to that? So I thought we'd do two things. What I want to do now, I thought I'd workshop it rather than just talk it. I came up with 12 ways we can be like a tree. And I thought I would just ask people, see what people come up with. Different ways you think humans can be like trees.
I don't want to wrinkle like a tree.
Oh, well,
I
I'll
don't
give
wanna
you back
wrinkle
what
like
you
a
said because I liked it so much. And that is that we can photosynthesize what we take in and send it out in a better way to help someone.
Okay?
You can be resilient like trees.
Huge.
Where
So, yeah?
even a storm
That's
will
right.
make us uproot.
That's right. Big part of a tree. That's right. And even if they get damaged or broken, they grow again. Resilience is a huge one. Yeah?
If we have a strong basis on what we've been raised with, our grounding and our strength in the roots come out as they grow out and support the tree so that it can withstand storms, strong winds, the canopy shades, provide shades.
Provide shade's a big one. Yeah, so it's up.
And another big thing is that councils are starting to realise that trees are so important to keep us cool, and that the temperatures underneath the tree are less than out on the outside of the canopy.
Wow.
And buildings, apartment blocks that are just all concrete
Air
around,
conditioning.
they have to use their aircon more.
That's so amazing, I tell you.
Hello.
That's beautiful. Thank
Than
you.
a building that has
So
got
shade,
glass
right.
and,
So how can humans do that? So this just,
relating it to humans.
yeah.
Provide an environment around you, around one, so that people feel cool, as in rested and calm within your presence.
Cute. Beautiful.
And
Okay,
they
yeah.
provide homes for all the birds
True.
and animals.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so funny, like mother, like daughter. I was gonna ask if you could say, because I was thinking about, like, there's so much that's relating to you for your birthday, but
Yeah. This, yeah.
yeah, that you have your home, your family, your home, and it, your family is growing, Baruch Hashem, and has grown, and you have your branches, and you also have these branches to house all the birds that are flying around looking and searching, and all the unusual species of things. We're all part of the family, but we make
We're the birds.
we're the birds, and you've got the materials that can build our nests with and everything, and all the little insects nourishment that we all share with the shop spinners and
Relate to everyone.
I mean,
That's
it's
true.
a family together, so it's very beautiful. Yeah.
And it's a solid base, right? It's a secure place for us all to
very much,
come.
very much, yeah.
Beautiful. Any other thought? Yeah.
In order to see what Hashem is, if you look at the creation, you can see who the creator is. So, because we are part of Hashem, if we try and emulate Hashem and do what, do kindness and good to everybody, in a way, we are also, if we like the trees and we are the creation, then if we do good things, then we have our soul in us to emulate Hashem and be good to other people and to do all the mitzvahs, so in that way.
True, beautiful.
I think that just as a tree gives us oxygen, I guess we all give a little breath of inspiration among each other from time to time. So
It's true. And you often see that, there's that famous story about that we talk about how there are these massive trees in California and they're able to withstand severe winds, and when they were researched they thought they'd have deep roots, but they found they didn't have deep roots. They have to have shallow roots, but they're all interconnected, so each tree interconnects with shallow roots with the next one. And it's Rabbi Jacobson talks about that as Jews. That's what we need to be there, that we need to have our roots with Hashem, but we also need to help each other stand up. Trees help each other stand up underneath the ground. We don't see it, but they actually give each other support. And so we need to support each other, and sometimes it's done anonymously and people don't even know, but that's an important thing to do. What Rabbi Ginsburg says is also really interesting. He says the upside down tree is, we need to have deep roots, but we need to know it's coming from Hashem, because otherwise it's not the right source. People can live in the world, as I say, and be growing, but they're not connecting to the true source. Okay, any others? Let's have a look at some of the ones. So
No tree is the same as the next tree. Each tree is unique.
Its own conditions.
Its own style of branches and leaves and fruits.
yeah,
That not one tree is a carbon copy of the next tree. Like each and every one of us, we're all unique.
And
There's
necessary.
similarities in our personality,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
on a whole, we're all different. Every single person on earth is different.
So one of the other similarities is if a tree, a little sapling or a seed has a cut in it, it'll affect the growth of the tree. And so the Rebbe said very important how we educate children, because the very young children will be affected much more. So like a tree, early education is very important. Be supple in the wind. Make a lasting impact on the world. So that's what we're talking about. The trees can live for generations and make a lasting impact. There's another story you might not know. I mentioned the man with the fig tree, but there's a very famous story of Connie Magel. So most of the stories that you've heard as fairy tales, I've over the years found them in Jewish sources. So you'll tell me what the story reminds you of. So Connie Magel was walking along and he saw someone planting a carob tree. And he said, "Who are you planting this tree?" And this older man said, "I'm planting it for my grandchildren." So he said, "But it takes 70 years for a carob tree to grow. Why are you bothering?" And he showed a lack of faith in saying that, because we're saying it's a sign of faith. So Hashem put him into a deep sleep, and he slept for 70 years. And when he woke up, he was under this beautiful tree. He didn't realize that he slept for 70 years. The story's in the Gemara. He was a famous man, Connie Magel. He wrote things. He caused rain to happen. He was not a small personality. So when he woke up, he didn't know that the world had gone 70 years on. All his family had thought he died and disappeared. And he walked into his town, and no one knew who he was. And he went into the yeshiva, and they were actually studying his Torah teachings. And he went up, right, he said, that's me, I'm Connie Amagel. And they said, don't be ridiculous, he died 70 years ago, you know. And he said, no, it's really me. And he gave a very famous expression that we say now, which is, if not friendship, death. It's something that's spoken about a lot. Because no one recognized his essence, he actually said to Hashem, please, I'd rather die. Because when you walk in and you're totally anonymous, you feel like that. Anyway, the point was that his lack of faith in going, why are you bothering to plant the tree? So trees can last for generations, and they can often have stories. And I just had a thought, you know, I've always been bothered why people put hearts on trees. You know, as if they're always going to be in love. Maybe they are, but L loves R, and that's what's on it. And a beautiful tree is defaced. But I just realized now, maybe unconsciously people know trees last for years and years. It's going to be there. The concrete wall might be down, but the tree's going to be there. People always pick on trees. Right. Growth is best accomplished in private, what I was saying earlier, like trees. It's not something that a lot of our growth we can't really share, and we shouldn't be boasting about. It's a very interesting thing. I run a few groups, and we were talking about it in one of my groups this week, and someone was saying how this thing happened to her and she realized how much she had changed. And someone else in the group said, oh, I didn't know. And we were talking about when you change on a character level, when you become more generous or more patient or more forgiving, no one knows that you were challenged there before, or no one knows what effort you put in. You might, outwardly a year later, someone might notice, but when you're doing the growth, no one can actually see it. So a tree is an ever-changing dynamic organism, and the Torah wants that from us. The Torah wants us to be worthy, like the trees, of continuing to be dynamic, to keep growing, to stay strong in our roots, but to know what our roots are. So fascinating, as I say, very little written about it as a chag and with halachas, but at the end of the day, the symbolism is huge and very inspirational. This is an opportunity to really tap into our strengths and to realize that we can be resilient, we can do all these things we've spoken about, and it's something to work towards, but knowing where our true roots should be. So now what I thought I would do is I have some, I got this from Chabad Rabon, and I thought it was quite cute. He said these are things he thinks the trees ask themselves on Rosh Hashanah. So I thought everybody could fill one out. This should be, I printed out 25, there should be enough. And then afterwards, if anybody wants to share, they can. But I thought everyone could just take a few minutes. I have more here. Take a few minutes to just think about, if it was your new year, if today was your new year as a tree, to answer these questions. Oh, and I have pens here for everybody.
Pens.
Yeah, you can pass.
Would you like to comment about the optimum conditions that a tree can grow in? Likewise, as a human being, we say we have to grow. But in order for a tree to flourish, it requires particular weather and nutrients and environment and all those things. So in the same way, if we want to grow, we have to be learning and many other...
Beautiful. True.
Good question.
It's very good, yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Like, what is
So
it?
would you like to...
So
What's the foundation to growing? What steps do we need to?
So one of the things I think the Rambam says, he says things like, choose your neighbors carefully. Jews should live in a Jewish community. He talks about not moving away and living in isolation. Talk about Jewish lifestyle very much as being keeping the mitzvahs, really. If you want to grow, that's what we're saying, connected to your soul. It's actually living a Jewish life. Those are the conditions. They're not physical conditions. So a Jew, if you put them anywhere, and there's many, many stories of great heroes that were in terrible conditions, physically they didn't have good conditions, but if they had Torah learning, they were able to still thrive. That's where our growth comes. So it's nice if you've got the nice physical things, but it's about tapping into Torah and mitzvahs. But choosing your friends, choosing your activities, and choosing where you live are really important. And I've seen this myself. When people have moved away, like to exotic places, and they go, no, we're still going to stay from, they don't. It's impossible when you're not surrounded by it, because the world is such a magnet. It's very hard to do it on your own. But when you're living it, when you're coming to a Tu B'Shvat birthday for Bregan, and then you're coming for a Friday night, and then you're celebrating, that's what I started off saying. Every Yontif, every month, there's a rejuvenation, there's an input that is the context for growing. So I suppose it's analogous to getting enough water, Torah, enough nurturing, enough roots around you. Those are the optimal conditions. But it's not physical, and I really want to stress that, and that's what we can see from here as well, that it's one of the things I disagree with Maslow, where he talks about you can only self-actualize if everything is basic. But what you see through people who are fighting wars, or people who have been put into prisons, their basics aren't met, but if they have what Viktor Frankl says, meaning, they're actually able to survive. So we need to know that the physical is nice, but at the end of the day, if we attach to our roots and fulfilling mitzvahs wherever we are, that is how we will grow and we continue our growth. And often the hardships is what helps us to grow, because we have to tap into Torah and mitzvahs. We realize there is nothing else. So just make it meaningful to you, how you can understand the questions. Just to think about what you've done in the past year, and then a small commitment on how you could do better on that thing.
These are big questions. These are very big questions.